I'm Hilary. I've lived in the Gunnedah district all my life and experienced a few things with growing up on the farm. My sister and I, we would have to ride a horse 7 miles to school, so we opted to have Blackfriars Correspondence School. And during that time we had war years and petrol rationing, coupons for clothes and food, not all food but certain foods, and then going to school. I remember seeing the power station being built up near Blackjack Mine, and then they decided to build it down the Hunter, so they pulled it all down and moved it down there and rebuilt it. So we didn't get a power station in Gunnedah, and we used to come into town and board. Miss Minnie Westerwell had a little hostel for girls, but she became ill and couldn't have us for long, and we had private board then with various homes around Gunnedah, which were very good. We used to come in Monday morning and home Friday afternoon, and the family had to do all the shopping in that time because of the petrol rationing. We hadn't been in town long. In June long weekend 1945 we came into town, and Miss Westerwell took us up the street for the end of the war, and we were a bit scared. We'd never been without our parents in town before, and walking up the middle of the road, which we'd always been told you never do. But anyway, people were kicking kerosene tins up and down the street and letting off crackers and having good fun because the war was over. And we used to walk to school up the lane, and the old Pike power station would be there going toot 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 all the time, and had a big chimney on it, and it had run, well, every night. It ran at night anyway. We had various places where we did board. Another time we were going home from school and we thought there was a fire towards Emerald Hill, and we just got home and everything went black. The chooks went on the roost and everything. It was a big dust storm, just went silent, and the dust storm came just as though it was sudden night. And then it was very quiet and silent. Then we got a bit of wind. There's various photos of that. Then we had board just here in Beulah Street for a while, and we used to walk down through where the gully runs now with a cement walkway in it, and we walked down there through a wheat paddock. It used to be harvested. That was in Beulah Street. And then we'd go further down. We used to be scared of the old derelict fellows on the rubbish tip at the hill where the pool is now. Then they started, about 1950 I think it was, they started building the pool there, and our next door neighbour did a lot of the excavation for the pool. It was all done with voluntary effort, which was a great thing for the town, still is. We used to have swimming carnivals at school down the river before that. And then we boarded between the police station and the Methodist church. The little brick house is still there, and from there we would hear and see the inmates of the jail working in the garden and things like that, of people who'd walk past and they'd ask them for a cigarette, which they weren't allowed to give them. And they had a walkway around it when they were inside in the exercise yard, and walkway around the top of the brick wall. And the policeman's wife that was living in the residence there at the time used to cook for the prisoners, and we went to school with a couple of the girls from the policeman's daughters. Petrol rationing made it a bit hard. You could only come to town on certain things, and we had to do everything on those days. That was before we started boarding in town, and we'd sometimes go to the Red Cross shop in the main street for lunch, where they'd cut and sell sandwiches and tea, to raise some money, because they were voluntarily making camouflage nets to be sent to the soldiers, and also knitting beanies and socks, making biscuits and sending them. I remember a gentleman was there who had a hearing aid, and he carried a box about the size of a shoebox under his arm, which I presume was the battery for the hearing aid. It was the first hearing aid I had ever seen. Where the police paddock was just over the back fence from that house where we were. It was part of the police station, where they kept the horses for the black tracker to use, and the black tracker and his wife, who was a policeman, lived just over the back fence, and we go down to the back fence and talk over the fence to them. What else did we do when we were going to school? Oh, yeah, Stock Road, where they have the division up the middle and a road on either side. They used to, before there were many trucks and that about and petrol rationing, they'd bring their stock from Colors and the eastern side of Gunnedah into the sales for Tuesday. They would drive them up Stock Road on horseback, and sometimes they'd get away and run round the streets, but mostly they got them along the right track to the sale yards. And then, because when they were sold, they'd have to be put on a train and sent away to be killed. Well, then eventually, about 1950, early 50s, we got an abattoir in Gunnedah, which was great, but that's another sad story there. We used to ring up home once a week when we were boarding in town on a Wednesday afternoon from the post office for twopence, and we'd buy an ice cream on Sports Day for threepence. My sister and I, 2 shillings would be enough pocket money to do us for the week between us, and sometimes on a Monday we'd be given some money to buy our lunch, and we'd buy a pie from Mr. Bish's pie cart, which was at the school, and it was like 2 push bike wheels with a little wheel in front and it handles like a wheelbarrow, and he had a little primer stove in it to keep the pies hot, and they were baked here in Gunnedah. They're very nice pies too. What else haven't I said? When we were growing up at home, before we even started school, farm life was our main life. We'd be out on the tractors and whatever was happening, and we weren't allowed to drive them until we were older, but I remember, well, I can't remember learning to drive the car or the old truck. We used to go and drive for Dad while he was feeding the sheep. We'd go down underneath and change gears and come up and see where we were going. We weren't long enough to reach the pedals and the steering wheel at the same time. But I've always driven. I can't remember learning to drive. And when I did leave school, I had a special licence to drive to Tech between the hours of sunrise and sunset, and between the property where we lived and the TAFE in Gunnedah. I think in those days I got a licence to drive to town at 16. I got my proper driver's licence at 17, and my truck driver's licence at 18. When growing up, we didn't have a lot of things because there wasn't much money to spare, or you couldn't buy lots of things. But Mum and Dad had been through a depression too, just before I was born, and their specialty for Christmas was to have Christmas cake and some raspberry cordial. That was their special at Christmas time. And then after we had done correspondence school, we hadn't mixed with anyone much, and then when I was in the middle of 5th class, we came to town to school, and that was a bit of a rude awakening, because having been petrol rationing, we didn't go anywhere at weekends, and we hadn't mixed with other children much, and to suddenly find yourself in a school full of children you didn't know. But it was all good, and we managed well. And while I was in a special class, but we had a special teacher who really taught us how to learn things and everything, and that was the making of it all. But we used to play in the playground with sticks. You'd jump over sticks. You'd have hopscotch with a boot-polished tin full of stones, and draw squares on the ground, and all those sort of things that didn't cost anything. And then we had a few games, but the swimming carnivals when I went to school were down in the river. Then I always did well at dressmaking. I got an A in dressmaking for the intermediate, and then when we left school I was happy to go home and work on the farm, and Dad wanted somebody on the farm, not having had any boys, and he said, well, if you're coming home to work on the farm, you've got to do something with girls. So we decided that well, I was the first one to leave school. I enrolled in the dressmaking course at the TAFE, or TEC as it was called then, and they were nearly all farm girls. There were 2 classes of us on a Tuesday. I used to go to TEC doing dressmaking. They had 2 teachers teaching dressmaking. Now you won't find a dressmaking class anywhere in the TEC system or TAFE system. But anyway, we all learnt well from it, and those girls are still our friends. They were all country girls from round the area, and we used to come in on a Tuesday. I had a special licence when I wasn't old enough to have my proper licence, just to drive between the farm and TAFE. And then we used to start and play a bit of sport at the weekends as the petrol was a bit more free, and we used to go to play tennis or things like that. But anyway, I did well with dressmaking and ended up getting an A in the 3rd year dressmaking. I was like a perpetual student and went to TEC for about 20 years. Either day or after we come to town, I was doing night courses in different things, perhaps excuse me, floral art or dressmaking and millinery and all the things that I enjoyed doing. But as Dad said, we had to do something with girls, so that Tuesday was set aside that was our girls' day at TEC, and many of those friends are still our friends now. And then after I'd been on this farm about 10 years, in which I did all the farm work. And Dad's health wasn't good, so he had to retire and sell the farm because he needed that to buy a house in town. And I did a few odd jobs, did a bit of housework for people and did some dressmaking. I think I did about 5 years of dressmaking for ladies roundabout, and that was quite good. And then I answered an ad in the paper of somebody wanting somebody to learn the counter work and do the alterations in the shop. And I got that job at the Robin Hood in the main street with Mrs. Mary Gleeson. And after working there for, I think it was 11 years, the Noonie Boutique became for sale, and I decided I'd buy it. So I bought it and ran that for another 39 years. So I did get to know the ladies of Gunnedah a little bit, and we had a lot of fun with fashion parades at various places and various CWA groups and things like that, and finding models and having fun, and the ladies seemed to have appreciated it. And even in the time I was running the business, things changed from very simple to a bit more sophisticated, and it was in that time we did have the change of currency too, from the pounds and shillings to dollars and cents. But I provided an alteration service, and that was a help to know how to make a garment fit a person. If it didn't fit, the person didn't always know what was wrong, but they knew why they didn't like it, but you could make it fit them. Then various things happened in the area. My shop was in the Marquis Street, the side street, but that became the second street in town really from the traffic lights. The main street was east and west, and the other one was north and south, and it was really just round the corner with a taxi rank in front, so it became quite a main street, main thoroughfare, and worked very well until I decided I wanted to retire. I was getting a bit too old to carry on.